is broadcasting, I hope, because it looks like there are people joining us. So I do want to say thanks to everybody who's joining us. I'm getting a message that my internet is unstable, so Gerardo, if you can't hear me, please let me know. And maybe it's Zoom and maybe it's me. I don't know. Gerardo, can you hear me? Okay.
Can you hear me now, Steph?
I can hear you. I think what I'm going to do is make you the host because I know we have people here, but it feels like my video, yes, feels like my internet connection may be not so great. And so at least if I drop out, Gerardo will still be here and everybody else can keep the conversation going. Okay. So, wow, we're gonna have fun today. I can see we're gonna have a lot of fun. Okay, so I'm sensing maybe that Gerardo, I shouldn't share my screen because every time I try to do it, it looks like Zoom kicks me out. So, although we had a beautiful presentation that we had queued up for you today, maybe we're just going to wing it because Zoom doesn't like it when I try to share my screen. So, Gerardo, can you still hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. And Rachel said she can be added as a host.
Okay, terrific. So it's weird because I do not see Rachel, but I will be happy to. So we're testing the limits of the internet today, apparently. And as soon as I can add someone else as a host, I'm going to let you guys maybe start talking. And that way, at least, we don't all get shut down. So let me see if I can find Rachel. Where's Rachel? Awesome. So I'm so sorry, guys. Thank you for bearing with us as we're having technical difficulties. There's Rachel. Yay. And so, hi, Rachel. How are you? We can't hear you. You're muted.
I'm good. How are you?
Apparently, I've broken the internet. So every time I try to do something, I'm going to make you the host. And every time I try to do something, it doesn't like me. So I'll just do my best. And
Stephanie, are you able to send the PowerPoint to me or Gerardo?
Yeah, so what I'll
run through it and
exactly
share it from my end.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is share that with you guys. So nothing like a little adventure in live, right? Assuming nothing craps out, I will be able to send that to both Rachel and Gerardo. But what we wanted to talk about today, for everybody who's not worried about us solving our technical problems, what we wanted to talk about today was a way for you guys to be your own stimulus package. And so we really wanted to focus on helping all of you who may have already applied or who are in the process of applying but haven't heard back yet, helping you guys take care of things that you can do yourselves, right? So while you're waiting on these various programs to kick in and you're thinking about how you can move your business forward, we wanted to really help you with that. So maybe, I don't know if Rachel and Gerardo, if either of you have seen the link to the presentation, but
yep.
Okay, perfect.
So, I'm
So
going to pull it up right now.
look at Rachel jumping in. I love it. Thank you so much for helping those of us
Thank you, Rachel.
who have terrible internet connections or children that are clogging all our bandwidth. It's hard to know.
No, you're good. You're good.
All
this is one way in which you can pivot, right? If you see an issue, you can lean on your colleagues.
Exactly.
Right. I'm going to share my screen for you guys too.
Thank you. And it also emphasizes the importance of flexibility, right? Flexibility and communication and community, because all of those things are also crucial to helping you and everyone kind of get through this time, right? And so what we wanted to talk to you about today was, again, don't wait around. there are plenty of things that are coming through, and I know we're going to talk about some of those programs towards the end of our conversation today. But I think up front, what we wanted to do maybe was give you some tips for how you can take action in your business. Some of them we've mentioned before, but we're going to dive into them a little bit more in depth. And then some of them are some examples, right, of folks who've successfully pivoted that might give you some ideas of things you could do in your own business. So I don't know, Rachel and Gerardo, you guys want to say hello? And I didn't introduce myself. I'm Stephanie Sims, the founder of Financeability, and I'm excited to be here today with Rachel and Gerardo from DreamSpring.
Yeah, my name is Gerardo, and I'm a credit access specialist with DreamSpring here in the Phoenix office. And my specialty is helping clients who do not have access to credit because of derogatory information, or maybe they just haven't built credit yet. They're new to starting a business or developing personal credit, and I help with any kind of technical assistance around access to capital.
And then my name is Rachel Burgoyne. I'm the lending team manager for DreamSpring. I am located in Tucson, Arizona, and my focus at this point is not really as much in direct lending, but in helping to manage and structure our lending team so that we can be as effective as possible to reach as many entrepreneurs as possible. So in the past, I've worked on everything from small microloans up to commercial real estate loans. So our hope today is that our experience working with small businesses can really help them to get the guidance they need through particularly the SBA's PPP lending product that's been launched. That's really been our focus almost like entirely for the last few weeks as that program's been enrolled. But we're also really excited to be working with Stephanie on, besides the SBA's relief options, what other options exist that clients can of DreamSpring and other folks who are in these webinars as well can really use to prepare their business as well as possible for the next few months. Obviously the SBA relief options can be one piece of that, but there are other things that need to be done to prepare for whatever pivot and kind of reimagination of the business model that needs to happen to help you survive. So again, this webinar might be a little choppy in terms of the fact that we're going to share the screen first, obviously, with the PowerPoint, so I can't really see Stephanie or Gerardo. I can't see your questions at this point. So we're going to maybe, I think, run through this presentation Stephanie's created, and then we will move on to some other updates for the SBA products that we mentioned too, so that you can get some updated information on that. But if you have questions, put them in the Q&A function that is on the bottom of your screen. The little bar down here has like a Q&A. Whoops, that's for the slideshow. I'll unminimize this really quick.
Yeah,
maximize.
I'm not sure they can see your Zoom screen. I don't know if they
Oh,
can, but if you're wondering where the Q&A is, you can scroll down in the bottom of your screen, and there's a little thing that looks like two caption boxes together that says Q&A, and you can stick your questions in there. And I don't mind, Rachel, since you're having to do the presentation, I'm happy to keep an eye on Q&A also.
thank you.
If we get some
Appreciate
questions,
that.
we'll make sure we get to those. Yeah.
Great. And then Stephanie, all I need from you is just an indication on when to change to the next slide when you're ready for that. So
You bet. I'll just say next.
Great.
And I know we do want to be respectful of everyone's time, so maybe we'll just go ahead and jump straight in. If you want to move to the next slide, Rachel, we'll just kind of give an overview of what we're going to talk about today. And so I know, and we've talked about this in past webinars as well, but sometimes it's easy to feel like there's nothing you can do, right? Especially if you can't open your business because you're not essential and you've been asked to close, or if you're just not getting a lot of responses from your clients, it feels like you might not be able to do things. But what we want to help you do today is focus on the things you can do. So one of them is to see what levers you have in your business. And then something that we've also been hearing is people asking themselves the question, I have some personal assets, or I might have the possibility to use some of my personal assets to help save my business. Should I do that? So we want to talk to you a little bit about those options. And then as we mentioned a little bit earlier, or maybe I was dreaming or I dropped out, but we want to make sure that if you're applying or if you've already applied, excuse me, for any of the stimulus programs that exist, we want to give you some tips there, because there's always some new information coming out. So we want to make sure you've got the latest on that. And then I know Rachel and Gerardo both have been working really closely with all of these programs. And so I'd love to hear from them at the end about what's new, what's updated. And I don't know if there are new programs that are being rolled out, but certainly we want to make sure we hear about those too. So that's kind of the overview for today. And then if we want to go ahead and jump in to the first slide, and it looks like we have a question. Will this presentation be available afterwards? And the answer is we will post the video on the COVID resource page at dreamspring.org, and we'll send you that link once it's posted by email. So you'll be able to see all of this presentation again. If you do think the slides would be valuable to you, feel free to respond to that email, and I'm happy to send them or find a way to get them to everybody. So hopefully that answers your question. So what levers have you got in your business? Now, we spoke a little bit about this last week, but one of the things that most people hear is that they're supposed to cut costs. But a lot of times when someone says cut costs, you don't really know how to do that or which costs to cut. And so I just wanted to give you a little framework that might help you do that. I want you, as you're thinking about these costs, to focus on the essential activities in your business. And in your business, there's really only 4 things that you absolutely have to do to keep going. The first one is you have to find a way to attract people who would buy your product or service. Then you have to find a way to deliver that product or service to them. And now a lot of you are thinking, okay, well, the ways I'm used to doing those things don't work, right? So if you're paying for things like attracting buyers that you can't actually do right now, those are good candidates for cutting costs. So an example is if you were running advertising to try to get people to come into your location, that may be a place you can save money right now because people can't come into your location, right? And so maybe there are other ways to reach out to those folks that would be less expensive and that would still help them stay in contact with you. So attracting buyers is one area of activity. Delivering product or service is another. But a couple of places where sometimes we don't focus as much is delighting folks who already have a relationship with you, and then pivoting to or building something new that would attract those people that haven't interacted with you before, or that would help your customers, your current customers, in a new way. And so as you're looking, one way to kind of make this super concrete is to download from your bank or from your accounting system, if you have one like Xero or QuickBooks, your month's worth of transactions, and just take those transactions and identify what part of your business they're for, right? Am I spending this money to attract? Am I spending this money to deliver? Am I spending this money to delight? Or am I spending this money to build something new? And already you'll be able to get a sense of where you're making the biggest investment in your business. And you can start to say, okay, can I actually get any kind of return on that investment? Meaning, if I'm advertising for people to come into my location, can that actually happen? And just by looking at it in that new lens, quite often you can find areas that you can reduce that may not be personnel and other things that you'd like to keep. Now, obviously, another piece of this is trying to understand what that return looks like. And so that's where you may have to think through exactly what you expect from each of those expenses. And I know, Gerardo, you and I talked a little bit about this when we were putting together a presentation, but maybe if you've got some examples of folks who've been able to reduce expenses in a way that really made sense and helped their business, that I'd love to get you involved, and Rachel, you too.
Yeah, for sure. No, we've seen a lot of examples of ways that businesses have tried to cut back and curtail some ongoing costs, right? So there's always those fixed costs, like what you have to pay your lenders, or what you have to pay a service provider to maintain monthly service. So insurance is one of those, right? So the first thing I think that a lot of clients do, or a lot of businesses we work with do, is they reach out, which is the right thing to do, is to reach out to their lenders or those fixed cost providers, like gyms or car insurance agencies, to see what kind of rebates they're giving for clients who have paid for services that they're not receiving due to COVID-19. Secondly, after you look at what's going out, you want to look at what's going on internally, right? So you want to look at what's going out, what you're paying and what you don't have to pay, but then you want to look at what's going on internally. So in terms of what are some costs that I've always associated with the business that don't necessarily have to be covered, or that we can operate with limited coverage. So what does that mean? A lot of people use QuickBooks, right? Well, maybe they have a premium package and they can scale that package down because their intention was to use a service that they were going to build out in the future, but for the purpose of keeping the business going, they don't need that. Maybe they can cut down, if they use Salesforce, they can cut down on the number of subscribers they're paying for, or users, right? Maybe that means you change your internal process to have a designated individual input information and then only use that individual's login for that information. At the same time, you want to look at ongoing costs in terms of what kind of expenses have you authorized your employees to make on your behalf? Do you have to hold a meeting where you're saying that you're not going to be charging expenses to certain accounts, right? This can go for any type of business. It doesn't have to be for an office-based business. It can be for landscaping. Maybe you've always let your employees or your contractors purchase materials up front and then have you reimburse them at the tail end. So this would be a good time to put in parameters and to ensure that the documents that you're giving your contractors state that you won't pay for materials until you've personally approved the price point for every material. So those are kind of some of the ways that you want to change your business habits to make sure that you're keeping an eye on your costs that are coming in and going out. At the same time, a lot of these behaviors will help you when the COVID-19 crisis is no longer affecting you. And so those are kind of some of the things that you want to keep an eye on. If you can ground some vehicles, if you can call the insurance provider and let them know you're not using those vehicles, if you can scale back on price on package and premium packages that you're paying for, if you can ensure that your cost of doing business is overseen with every employee that you have, then you might find yourself at the end of the day having a few extra dollars that you don't have to do anything with, but that you can put in a rainy day fund.
Yeah, I love those. I think those are great. And some of the ways, because I know sometimes this is about, changing habits, right? Sometimes it's hard to get people to change habits, but sometimes what you can do is you can use a new process. You can use this, as Gerardo said, as an opportunity to create a new process. And moving to something like a gift, like a prepaid card, could help that as well, which is a great way also to manage if you're having employees buy things for you, as opposed to them having them buy it and then you reimburse them. You can give them a prepaid card, and that way you're much more aware of what's being spent as it's happening, if you're not necessarily approving all those costs up front. So I love those suggestions. I think that's a great approach to getting new habits that are going to help your business not only in the short term, but as we come out of the new normal, and we see what that's like, right? Because nobody really knows. So that's one of the levers you've got. One of the biggest levers is trying to control your expenses better. But if you want to move, maybe Rachel, to the next slide, unless you had something you wanted to add here.
Yep, I will move to the next slide.
Awesome, thank you. So reducing costs is one part of the equation, but then if you're not able to generate revenues, you need to do more than just reduce expenses, right? You need to find a new way to get some money coming in. And so this is where that fourth sort of activity we talked about before, building new offers, can be really interesting. And this is where a lot of people are talking about pivoting, right? So I want to talk a little bit, and I know Gerardo has some good examples as well, that that there are lots of ways that we can successfully pivot. And it really means focusing on who needs something that you already have. And so even though your business may have been going in a particular direction, and here I'll use an example of a local restaurant that was noticing that even though they had opened up for delivery and takeout, they weren't getting anywhere near the normal revenues that they were expecting. They pivoted and said, well, we have a supply chain that allows us to get fresh items like milk and eggs and even toilet paper. And we're willing to sell that to our neighborhood, right? To our local customers, because that's how we could be of most value. And so when you start to think about who needs what you've got, sometimes you have to take out what you're used to providing and really look at what you could provide now and help people where they are. And again, I think Gerardo, you and Rachel may have had some other examples there of people who've successfully pivoted that could be really useful and instructive to the folks with us today.
Whoops, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I have a really good example of that, Stephanie. Thank you so much. That's a great point. So here in Phoenix, there's a couple of corridors that operate, in conjunction with each other, meaning that they all operate the same kind of historical space, and a lot of them buy their inventory independently. So maybe you have this corner market and this, a meat market and a corner market next to each other. The meat market only sells meat. The corner market sells all types of groceries. But they both order meat from separate distributors. They both get weekly, shipments. There's nothing stopping them from joining together with a couple of other of the markets in the same area who receive shipments from different distributors, and then all approaching one distributor collectively to negotiate a bargain, right? So let's say that you're shopping from 5 different distributors. You don't know that because you're not talking to the other businesses in your area, but let's say all of you guys are getting shipments in once a week for steak, whatever it is. And you guys are each have a contract worked out with that distribution team or that distribution provider, the steak provider. But if you guys came together to form a collective agreement and then purchased that steak from one meat distributor, then you can greatly reduce the cost to your individual business by sharing the expenses with those other businesses. Is that going to be complicated? Yes. Would you guys have to negotiate a contract with each other, an agreement? Sure. You want to get all this on paper. You want to go talk to the right people who can help you get into the direction of working this into your system. But this is one way in which you can greatly reduce the cost of inventory over time, if you so choose to have that relationship with those similar business models.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, right? Because sometimes this new innovation is not just trying to do it on your own, right? It's connecting with other people and learning from what they're doing, but also collaborating with them to make something possible that maybe none of you could have done as effectively on your own. So I think those are great examples. One, Rachel, I don't know, I'm just barreling ahead here because I'm trying to make sure we stay on time, but did you have something that you wanted to share there?
No, you guys are doing great.
Okay.
I'll add most of my input at the end when we talk about SBA updates.
Okay.
I do want to add, I have to step away for 2 minutes just to address a PPP emergency, which is good news. That means that we're helping people stay in business. I'll keep my screen on. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
No worries. Thank you.
And I'll briefly brag. It's like heading up our closing team for loans that are actually closing and funding in our system. So he is stepping away basically to make sure that a loan is funded right now, which is really cool. So
right. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Yeah. So maybe one more thing before we move on that you can think about as a way to improve your outcomes, whether it's reducing costs or generating additional revenues, is do you have some assets, right? So do you have some equipment that someone might be able to rent from you and use in a different way, or that you might be able to subcontract some work on and generate some revenue in that way? Or the other thing to think about, and again, this goes back to a couple of the examples where people had inventory on hand, another thing to think about is instead of you having to use that inventory, is there a way that you could make that inventory available to other people if you're not able to use it to produce your product or service? A lot of people, for example, in 3D printing have been able to shift and create really useful personal protective equipment for our healthcare workers, right? Even though they weren't in that market before. And so I would just encourage you, as you're thinking about everything you have in your business, to get really creative about who might need that. And then we do have a little worksheet that you can connect with each other using, that we'll put the link in at the end. And if you have something to offer that would be useful to people, please feel free to put it in there, because that way they can reach out to you if you don't know who they are. One thing I would make sure is, especially if you're thinking about selling the assets that you own, if it's a piece of equipment or something, you want to be sure that you check with anyone who might have a lien against that equipment before you sell it, so that you're not only keeping the lines of communication open with them, but that you're fully understanding how much cash it would really bring into your business. So that's to me, that's kind of the overview on levers that you have. Now, if you guys have questions, or if you'd like more details about this, or maybe if a template would be helpful, I'd love for you to share that with me. I'm always trying to put together resources that would be very concrete and very helpful for you. So you can either let me know in the chat, or you can let me know as a response to the email that we'll send out as a follow-up to this event. So again, if a template would be helpful, if any kind of additional resource, maybe even just a document that walks you through what we talked about, would be helpful, I'm happy to do it. Okay. And so I see Summer said that a template would be great. So I think that's going to be my next step, but maybe for now we'll keep moving. And Rachel, if you'd move us to the next slide, that would be great. So what we wanted to talk about here real quickly was the question of, should you mix business and personal? And so you may have heard, as part of the CARES Act, that there have been some changes to the way that using your retirement funds would be taxed if you chose to do that. And I know there may be some people, if you're speaking to them about borrowing to save your business, that may be talking about leveraging your personal assets, right? So maybe that's a mortgage or a second mortgage on your home. Maybe that's some sort of asset-based lending using your investments or your savings account. So those are options, right? And we want to make sure that you understand that those options are available to you. But I would really encourage you, before you try to do those things, to understand two things. First, you need to absolutely understand how much money your business needs, not just to survive for the next 4 to 8 weeks, but to survive through the end of 2020. Because you need to ensure that if you're going to mix your personal assets with your business and kind of double down on the success of your business, you have enough capital to make that happen, right? So the worst thing to have happen would be that you take one of these personal options and then you only have enough cash for your business to make it for the next, say, 2 months. And since none of us know what's going to happen, our current situation lasts longer than that. So I would really encourage you, before you start to pursue any of these personal options, first off, to know how much money your business needs to survive through the end of the year. And then second, you really need to be clear about how you're going to replace those assets. For example, if it's your 401k that you're going to use to support your business, what is your retirement plan, and how long do you have to really rebuild that asset before you have to use it if your business does not survive? And again, not trying to be doomsday or say that everything's really bad, but as you're making these really impactful decisions about not only your business, but your personal life, what you don't want to do is put yourself in a more difficult situation by choosing to use those personal assets. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. And again, if you've got more questions about that, I'm happy to connect with you independently, or feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll get to those in a little bit. I just want to make sure we can get through everything today. So Rachel, maybe we can move to the next slide, which
Sure.
is going to be something that I know Gerardo wanted to be sure that we talked about, but you can probably speak to as well.
Absolutely.
Which is, look, here's some important stuff to know about the current stimulus applications.
Yep. So we've had a lot of questions, of course, coming in the last few weeks about this. And so I want to make sure to be clear about kind of how to use these programs the best. So one, not update necessarily, but one thing that we want to be emphasizing is that ultimately you can only have one application for PPP that's approved by a lender. So what we've been encouraging folks to do is that if you are seeking out a PPP loan, the Paycheck Protection Program loan, through, and if you start pursuing, those different options, we'd actually recommend it so that you can work with the one ultimately that can get you to the finish line the fastest. What you want to do is this: once you get an approved PPP loan with a lender, you immediately tell the other lenders to withdraw the applications that they have going for you. Because we do not want you to be in a situation where you have the SBA having two PPP applications that are essentially identical being processed for you by two different lenders. That would potentially get you into some pretty big trouble later. They don't want, any sort of double dipping happening, for anyone. So just make sure that ultimately you have one PPP application that's approved the lender. But again, it's okay to have a couple different applications going with, maybe your business banker and with DreamSpring, or if you have another local community like bank or credit union that's taking applications for, new clients. Those are all fine options to pursue at the same time. But once you get an approval, you need to immediately withdraw any other PPP applications that you have going. What we've found is that, again, because of the SBA's kind of changing guidelines and updates on this product, it's been it's been 1 week now since it's been launched. There's been so many updates, so much confusion around what documents can be counted as verification of payroll, that a lot of lenders, have been pretty slow, including us, in terms of figuring out how to best roll out this product and make sure that people are not going to have to pay this loan back, because it's designed to be a forgivable loan, which means that the documents that are gathered have to be ones that the SBA are willing to work with. And, lenders are figuring this stuff out in different rates of speed and implementing this stuff in different rates of speed. So again, one final application that is approved through the PPP process is really important, but you can have multiple applications going until you get to that approval stage. Second big update is the EIDL grant that we talked about, the economic injury disaster loan, also referred to often as like the disaster relief loan, that a lot of folks we encourage to apply for, within the past few weeks. The grant of up to 10K that the SBA had initially talked about so much, we found that they changed what they're doing with that and doing up to 10K still, but they're limiting it to 1K per employee of the business. So if you applied for that grant, the up to 10K language that they had us using has now been clarified more to 1K per employee. Now the loan application is still there, obviously, but nothing has changed in a big way about that loan product. The grant, though, we have gotten that clarification around that. So another thing that we're just reiterating here is that that you're applying for these products, the EIDL loan and grant and the PPP loan, the real data that you're taking from your books, from your records. Don't just estimate when you're filling out the SBA paperwork or when you're turning in the final paperwork to the lender you're working with. Make sure you read the SBA certifications carefully so that you know that you're complying. An example of this is for the PPP loan. They have a like a supplemental application that is turned into the lender. So the lender usually has their own application that you fill out, and then the SBA provides a PPP loan application, and it has you check all these boxes with yes or no to different things. It's like one example is, have you ever defaulted, or have you defaulted in the last 7 years on any government-backed loan? Yes or no. Have you, are you incarcerated, on parole or probation? Yes or no. One thing as well to just note that's important is it'll ask you if you are just like, applying for employees or independent contractors through this product. And it's important to pay attention to that stuff, because if you read through it really fast and you just kind of like initial everything, just check everything that you think you're supposed to, that is not just like arbitrary information they're asking it because those are the things that determine if you're eligible to apply or not. So please just pay attention to that stuff, so that then when the lender is working with you on the application, they know that was carefully paid attention to, and that all the eligibility criteria are definitely true and valid. So last thing that we've been mentioning to everyone.
Sorry, Rachel. One thing, we do have a question on that. Kelsey is asking, do independent contractors count as employees for PPP?
They do not. No. Nope. And that's why they asked that in that form that is being sent out to everyone. Independent contractors can apply for PPP, but they have to do it on their own. Starting today, the application process is open to both sole proprietors and independent contractors. So when a business owner is applying for the PPP loan, they're only providing payroll information and documentation for employees. Independent contractors should not be included in their application. The independent contractor should be told by their employee to apply on their own. They'll need a 1099 miscellaneous, showing their income for 2019.
Right, and that, I don't know if you want to finish here, but like that was kind of one of the things I know we wanted to talk about what's new.
Yes. And the final thing, honestly, like that we're really frustrated about and still trying to get more guidance on. If you are this is not in the presentation because it's something that literally we've learned as of this morning. If you are an LLC or a corporation, so this is not, I'm not talking to sole proprietors here, I'm talking, or independent contractors, I'm talking about LLCs and S-corps and other corporations and partnerships. You need to be just providing very specific documentation the SBA is willing to look at that verifies payroll. So that includes there's two different IRS like federal forms that we can take from 2019. Either Form 941, which is the quarterly information that you provide to the federal government for tax purposes around the employee wages that you're paying and other compensation, or the 944, which is the annual form that you're submitting to the federal government, again, with that information about compensation and taxation and all that. So Form 941, Form 944, and then payroll processing records are the only valid payroll verification documents that we can take for PPP for LLCs, corporations, partnerships. So distributions and draws, if that is how, let's just say it's a single employee LLC. So one person really working for the LLC, and they paid themselves through distributions and draws. What we're learning from the SBA as of this morning is that they have to provide a 941, a 944, or payroll processing records. That can include information that you get from, if you use a payroll, let's just say you contract that work out and have a business that does your payroll record keeping and all that for you, or if you use a payroll software, you can get those processing records from 2019 to count as verification. But if you just have a P&L that you've put together for 2019, and then you take, distributions and draws as the way that you pay yourself, that is not something that we can necessarily move forward at this point with, because the SBA is still saying that's not acceptable documentation. That may change because the SBA is good at one thing in this consistently, and that is changing. So what we recommend for you, if you are an LLC, corporation, a partnership, and you've paid yourself through distributions or draws in 2019, you should definitely have your EIDL application in today if you haven't already, because that loan is way more flexible around how you can use it and what sort of documentation is going to, be accepted. The PPP, the SBA is still really specific on this as being a paycheck protection program, and so they want very specific types of payroll records. So that's one of the biggest updates I wanted to make sure to include today in our talk.
I think that's really helpful. And what I'll do is when we do the follow-up, I'll also send maybe a link to what that 941 or the 944 looks like, so people can see it.
Yep.
It's a document that basically when you pay your payroll tax deposit, it's the document that you fill out that accompanies that. And so if you, again, I'll send you out the link so you all can see it. But I think it's also important for you to understand that that it's a challenge for folks who are paying themselves through draws, right, and distributions.
It is a challenge, and it's one that we're particularly frustrated about because a lot of folks do that. That's how they pay themselves, And so we're doing our best to continue to raise this concern to our SBA contacts to see, can this move at all? And if there's enough, pushback, then at some point they might be willing to open the process up more. But I don't want people putting all of their hopes in a process when this is the guidance that we're getting as of today. So what we have been doing, or what we will be doing with our applications that we have in our system that are falling in that category of an LLC or corporation where draws or distributions were the ways that they were paying themselves, we're not going to decline or withdraw those applications, because at some point, again, the SBA might have a change. We don't want them to lose their place, in our waiting queue. But we do want to encourage them now. You get your application in for EIDL if you haven't already, and you need to make sure that you are not counting on this loan this loan also does have finite funds from the SBA. So obviously we wouldn't want you counting on it for everything to begin with, but please, please, please just take my advice and looking for other options if that's the way that you paid yourself.
Yeah, and I think that to the point of not kind of counting on this, the reality is that we don't know exactly how this is going to shake out for everybody, and that's why some of the things that we talked about a little earlier, right, in terms of understanding how you might reduce expenses and how you might pivot, is also super important. Because as Rachel points out, this is still a fluid situation. And while we know the SBA is doing everything they can to try to help, they're also limited by the legislation that was passed, right? And so there is a cap on how much money is available right now, although there are conversations about extending that. So just, be cognizant that that you need to have a plan that this may be part of, but this can't be your only plan.
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
And then the last little bullet point here, and we won't get too in depth here, but making sure you track all the uses of funds if you do get this loan, so you can prove by the end of June that you've used the funds in the ways that are eligible, and then you can have that loan forgiven is really important. This PPP loan, is a 2-year term from when from the day that you actually get it dispersed. And so if you end up getting, maybe you get a $20,000 loan for payroll, and you don't keep good records of how you actually use that loan for payroll, you're going to have to pay that back. They're not going to forgive the loan if they can't see proof of how you use the funds. So that's the last thing that we just want to emphasize today, so that folks are prepared if they do get this loan on how to make sure it's forgiven.
Awesome. And then because I see we do have a question. So one of the questions we've got is there a different PPP application for independent contractors? So why don't maybe we talk about that, since that's one of the new things.
Yeah, there's not a new application. The one application that's been, so I'll give this the best kind of overview I can. So when you go to a lender, any lender, whether it's DreamSpring, whether it's a bank or a credit union, they usually have their own application that they use just to get you into their system. The SBA's PPP application is like a couple pages. It's standard all across the board. Everyone's using that same PPP supplemental application. That will not be new or different. You're just going to be filling it out as an independent contractor. And so there is not like a new or different application that we're aware of. Again, it's the first day that independent contractors and sole props can apply. So I really hope this stays the same as of Monday, but we'll see. As of today.
And I don't mind attaching a link to that as well in the email.
Thank
so
you.
If you haven't seen the application, do you guys have it on your resource page too?
I don't know if we have it on our resource page. I know we've been sending it to our current clients in email form through like a link that they can click on and fill it out. So
well, and I don't mind sending a link just so
page.
people can see it, right? So they can see what
that'd be great.
Yeah, no worries. And then we do have a couple of other questions / comments. So one says they're kind of describing their experience. It looks like there's several people who are saying that this has been their experience. They've applied for EIDL maybe more than once, and they haven't heard anything back. And so I've got a little bit of anecdotal evidence on that one too. And then several of them are saying, look, I've heard more from PPP than I have from EIDL. Is this normal? Should I be concerned? Where are we at on that?
Nope, that's so normal. Very, very normal. So EIDL is being administered directly by the SBA, which means that right now the SBA, which normally doesn't directly administer loans, is now having to figure out what to do with millions of applications. So they are definitely slower than the PPP process, because the PPP process is kind of in a way deputizing a bunch of lenders that already exist, that already know how to handle loan applications. They have a pipeline for how to handle this, that's way better than what the SBA would have. And so the PPP application that's deputized and sent through these lenders are just being sent to people who are prepared to handle this better. So the PPP application is a faster moving product for sure. And that's everyone's experience that I've heard so far.
Right. And again, to your point, it's kind of normal because you have a lot more people, meaning individual banks and organizations like DreamSpring, that are able to reach out to help with PPP, whereas EIDL is really going through the SBA.
Yep, it is one SBA. There's no other contractors that are working on those for them. It's just one administration. So
yeah, now I did have a client who reached out, who actually called the SBA about their EIDL loan, and he said, first off, he was pleasantly surprised that not only did they answer, but they were very polite and tried to help him, which I think is great. It's good to hear that they are responsive. And he said that what he was told is that they are assigning these loan applications to underwriters, meaning people who can actually make a decision. And that was going to take 2 to 3 weeks. And that person would reach out directly to him. And then once that process had happened, once he'd spoken with somebody, then any funding on the advance would happen within 2 to 3 days of that first conversation. So I don't know if you guys have heard that, but again, just one person's experience, but I do know we're gonna have to be patient.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And the grant itself, I still haven't talked to any clients that have actually received the grant money yet. Some of them have heard back, in terms of how much of the grant, that they'll be getting. And they've heard confirmation that their loan is, being worked on, things like that. But I haven't heard of anyone who's actually gotten directly funded by the SBA yet for the EIDL loan or grant. Stephanie, have you heard anything?
No, I have not. I have not heard anyone who has actually received anything. And I think, again, to Rachel's point earlier, we know that this is a big lift. And I think everybody's probably seen the statistics, right? But I think the SBA usually processes like 75,000 loans a year. And I think on the first day of PPP, they got over 25,000 applications, right? And so like, in a day, they've gotten 1/3 of an entire year's worth of work. So of course, while everybody's heart is in the right place and everybody is trying to do the best they can, things will take a little bit. And so I know it's hard to be patient when you see things being very difficult for you and for your employees, but I would try to encourage you maybe to find other ways that you could take action, and then get on a schedule where maybe you're talking to folks like Rachel and Gerardo every few days, right? Because I will say that calling people every day or twice a day is probably not going to make things go faster.
Yeah, and for a lot of us, email or text message is the best way right now, because there's no way we can answer every call coming our way and then still fund you guys, right? So so that would be the best way to contact your lenders. If you're going through a big bank, then they might have a customer service line you can contact.
I have seen from some of the big banks like Chase and Wells as well, that they're really trying to get people to ask questions by email or online, because they're having challenges on call centers as well. So, and I would just say your best bet, although I know it's nice to talk to somebody, the truth is if you're trying to document everything that's been done, it's nice to have a written record of that. And so sometimes email can also be your friend in that respect. And
I would just add on to that really quick that I've learned pretty quickly in this time where everyone's a little anxious and where information from the SBA particularly keeps changing. Written records really are the best way to like be able to kind of look back and see what's new, like what's changed, what's been decided. Like what if you have an email record of a conversation with your loan officer, then if you have had things change a few times that week, going back and being able to read through that is so helpful, because the conversations that we're all having with folks, it's again, everyone's a little bit stressed out right now. Everyone's a little bit scattered in terms of trying to, for us, trying to get to as many clients as possible, trying to learn what the SBA is doing. If we have an email conversation with you where we give you the updated information, that way it's there for you to reference later.
Yeah, well, and sometimes it can be nice also because there can be misunderstandings, right? Like, two reasonable people can have a conversation and not come away with the same conclusion. And so sometimes sending an email to follow up, even if you have had a conversation, can be really helpful because you clarify, hey, here's what I heard. And if this isn't right, could you please let me know, because I'm making decisions based on this information.
Yep.
We do have a couple of other questions if you guys have time for them. One is, I have applied for PPP, but I have 3 of my employees that have recently filed for unemployment benefits. How will this impact my PPP if I'm approved?
It will not impact it. So it's totally fine for them to file for unemployment right now. If the PPP application is approved though, and you can then pay them, they need to then stop taking unemployment and start being paid by you. So it's totally fine. Oh, sorry, Hardo, you go.
No, you're good. I think there was also an update for sole proprietorships, right? Or was it for independent contractors?
Yeah, pretty soon. I don't know if there's a date decided yet, but pretty soon they'll be able to apply for unemployment as well.
So if you're an independent contractor or sole proprietor, but you don't need, but you don't want to apply for EIDL or anything like that, and you just wanted to file for unemployment, that's going to be regulated through the states individually. Is that correct?
Yep, as far as I know.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that all of these, although we have a lot of programs and it feels like there's a lot of rules and weird things, the goal is to make sure that we are getting people the help they need, but that we're not allowing people to kind of double dip, right? And so that's why there's kind of all these weird rules to put people in specific situations. It's just to make sure that we have as much aid for as many people as we can to help them, but that we're avoiding double dipping. So, okay, couple of other questions. So Beth says, the time period to figure payroll is confusing. Due to staffing changes, none are really representative of payroll. So what are your suggestions?
So there are 2 ways to calculate payroll. If the business has been open for all of 2019, like so if they opened prior to January 1st, 2019, then they need to provide payroll information for that calendar year. So January 1st to December 31st, 2019. If they opened partway through 2019, or even this year prior to February 15th, they had to have, opened their business, then they need to provide payroll information for 2020. Gerardo, is it the first 2 months of 2020, or is it?
So all of the dates I'm seeing are February 15th and before, or February, yeah.
Yep, so January 1st to February 15th payroll information to determine what they're eligible for. Because basically we're just trying to get a monthly average of payroll, and there's 2 different ways that the SBA is allowing it to happen depending on how old the business is.
And if you're including rent, I just double checked, yes, the date is February 15th, 2020. So all anything incurred before. So if you are also considering the PPP for that 25% to cover rent or utilities or anything like that, then those would have to have incurred prior to 1520 as well.
Yep.
Yeah. And so
the assumption being, sorry, Stephanie.
No, go ahead.
The assumption being that if you were approved and you used the funds, as long as you started documenting that you were paying that gap period, then that would be fine.
Right. And I know we've got a few more questions and comments, but we are at the top of the hour. So what I'd like to do, to be respectful of everyone's time, is to perhaps screenshot these questions. Right now, that's the only way I know how to do it, and see if we can find some answers to them and share those in the follow-up email.
Yep.
So thank you guys so much for being with us again this week. For those of you who haven't been with us before, we are doing this every Friday. Right now we're planning to do it every Friday through the end of the month, I think. And if you guys have particular questions that you want to be sure that we cover, feel free to respond to us at once we send out the follow-up email, and we'll do our best to include them in next week's conversation. Vanessa says thank you. Thank you, Gerardo and Rachel, for the great information. We appreciate it. And if there are, like I said, specific things that you want us to focus on next week, please share those with us. Otherwise, we'll be back with latest updates and other things that we can think of to help you keep your small business alive. Rachel, you guys have anything you want to share before we close out?
I just want to share thanks for being here. I know that it's a stressful time for all of you too. Stressful time for us as well, as we're trying to figure out how to best help you and get you through this system. We really appreciate you just sticking with us and asking your good questions, and continue to do that. You can always email us too with any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you guys. Sorry for stepping away.
No problem. But it is
No
Easter,
problem.
so like try to try to have a good time. Get outside, enjoy yourselves.
Right. Find some candy. Bye. Bye.
All right. Take care, guys.